and proposed a law to expose Kenya Power IPP deals on page 8. And in Matters Sports, Kenyans stars chase Diamond League glory on page 36. It is actually the back page of 8. It tells you the Kenyans to watch in Eugene. Kipyegon, Morao, Manyala and Chepkoech headline classic lineup at Prefontaine Classic meet this weekend. Reminds me, by the way, EPL is back.
Oh yeah.
Tomorrow.
What are the matches? What matches do we have?
I definitely know Mani is playing against Brighton. Being told that's the only important game to focus on.
Which game is that?
Man U and Brighton.
Oh, people still watch Man United?
Oh yes.
Oh really?
Oh yes, we still do.
for Maguire's antics.
Man City are playing West Ham.
Well, we'll be updating. Someone is getting very excited. I think he should be making a phone call somewhere right now. He's getting very excited about this. Let's take a look at what's headlining on the People Daily. And as I do this, kindly see if we can get any other newspapers this morning.
Oh yes, we definitely have them.
Yes.
We'll be updating them later.
Okay. On the People Daily this morning, the big headline, report of 128 killed by police. This is from Imalu, and it says the data implies that the president's efforts to address police abuse and protect urban youth have fallen short, as evidenced by increase in number of victims this year. It's alarming. Impunity. Whistleblower reveals majority of victims documented this year alone were young male adults aged 18 to 35 years, basically youth in the Kenyan description. Officers also accused of perpetrating torture, inhuman degrading treatment or punishment, as well as enforced disappearances. That's story on page 4, and it makes reference to that report by the Independent Medical Legal Unit released yesterday on the state of human rights in Kenya, and they say that the number of cases of extrajudicial killings has doubled over the last 1 year. That's the big story on People Daily. On the top of the People Daily, there's 67.8 billion shillings debt by millers written off. This is on Matters Sugar milling. Definitely a big story, especially in Western Kenya. On the bottom strip are the highlights there. Why country will wait longer for Kenya Kwanza goodies? And this is one of the questions we've been asking. When do we expect things to get better, as promised by the Kenya Kwanza administration? But the story on page 16 of the People Daily appears to suggest that we could be waiting longer for the goodies by Kenya Kwanza. On a sports highlight there, Harambee Stars set to face Gabon. Well, I don't know what kind of hope we have there. We saw what happened with South Sudan, but we remain hopeful nonetheless. That's the front page of the People Daily this Friday.
Waswahili wanasema kuanguka si kuteleza. Au kuteleza si kuanguka. Kuteleza si kuanguka. On the Star this morning, the Star goes with matters the judiciary, and it says bottlenecks. CJ says judiciary fund not operating optimally. So according to Kome, judicial independence is under attack, and one challenge is independent institutions encroaching on area reserved for judiciary. And that is from page 4 to page 5. On the top strip, Matters Siasa, page 6, more on that story is on page 6. County boundaries in brackets for new counties, another fresh crisis in the making. On the left side, CS Kindiki, the US secured release of WorldCoin owners. So according to Kindiki, Professor Kindiki, on the WorldCoin probe, the government obtained the American citizens behind WorldCoin activities and only released them after the US government intervened. Interior CS on Thursdays told MPs that WorldCoin owners were detained while trying to leave the country. And other headlines making it to the Star: county delays payment of pending bills. County governments are increasingly avoiding paying pending bills, piling agony on suppliers and contractors who have gone for months and years without pay. The Star has established that the devolved units are not clearing the pending bills that have ballooned to over 150 billion Kenyan shillings. And below there, anti-LGBTQ plus demo planned in Mombasa. And it is actually going to be happening today, on Friday, to oppose the Supreme Court's decision to allow the registration of organizations that champion same-sex relations. That is on the Star this morning. The Supreme Court said that is not a straight case. So we'll have to see how that will be going on.
Okay,
yeah.
Interesting.
No pun intended.
It's one of those discussions that everyone just wants to stay away from.
Oh, yes.
But twende kwenye gazeti la Taifa Leo. Waziri bila kazi.
Taifa Leo decided go...
They're throwing stones. Waziri bila
bare knuckle,
kazi.
actually.
Mshauri wa rais kuhusu masuala ya uchumi aongoza ujumbe wa kibiashara Amerika badala ya Moses Kuria. They have a very big picture there of Moses Kuria on the front page. Pigo. Hulka ya waziri wa biashara Moses Kuria imemfanya azuiwe kanyaga Amerika anakowakilishwa na mshauri wa kibiashara kwenye ziara ya Rais William Ruto nchini humo. Mnamo Julai, mwakilishi wa masuala ya biashara ya Amerika Catherine Tai alikataa kukutana na Bwana Kuria. Habari hiyo iko kwenye ukurasa wa pili wa Taifa Leo. Interestingly, it is the former industrialization CS Aidan Mohamed who's handling this docket during the president's visit to America, while Waziri Moses Kuria is in Kenya talking about matters Ruiru and what you can find there. Yes, apparently there's some cheap cooking oil in Ruiru, according to the CS.
All right.
Everyone, and according to a question we are asking, what are you doing to cope with the rising cost of living? And according to CS Moses Kuria, he suggests that you should probably go to Ruiru.
And to find a cheaper way of living.
Something you can find there that could help you along those lines.
Yeah.
Other stories making it to the front page of Taifa Leo. Shule za kwama, serikali ikichelewa kutuma pesa. Yes, and I think it's a big headline on the Standard. Shock of schools, 29 billion shilling debt. The PS has said the money will be released next week. Remember, kucheleweshwa kwa fedha hizi kuweza ku-affect mitihani ya baadaye muhula huu. Kuathiri. Thank you for that correction. Kuathiri mitihani ya kitaifa baadaye muhula huu. Habari zingine ambazo zimepewa kipaumbele kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo. Sapit aonya wanaozuia majadiliano. Kwingineko, vifo Libya vitafika 20,000. Well, we were just talking about 11,000 this morning, but according to the mayor of Derna City, the death toll is set to go up. Habari nyingine pale juu kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo. KEMSA kuharibu dawa za bilioni 1, wagonjwa wakitaabika. Mamlaka ya kusambaza dawa nchini KEMSA imesema kuwa itaharibu dawa ambazo muda wao wa matumizi umepitwa na wakati na vifaa vyote ambavyo vina thamani ya zaidi ya shilingi bilioni 1.8. Sad. Habari hiyo iko kwenye ukurasa wa 4 wa gazeti la Taifa Leo, lakini habari kubwa pale, waziri bila kazi.
Waziri bila kazi. Business Daily managed to get the highlight on matters. The new fuel prices below the bottom strip of Business Daily. Treasury eyes higher excess duty on fuel in IMF deal. Just to get a brief on this, on the first paragraph, the Treasury has disclosed that excise duty on fuel will be revised by April next year in a move that mirrors one of Kenya's commitments and an international monetary, IMF financing deal. It is on the bottom strip there. Ruto orders PS's parastatal heads to account for tax billions. Another story on the Business Daily. So officials have up to the 2nd of October to respond to audit queries, and also memo warns law compliance is fueling corruption. Just to take a look at on the ticker, MPs block Senate from scrutinizing national debt, and Nairobi's takes 3.9 billion shillings foreign forex hit in Kenya. And finally, CBK dollar limit order hands banks advantage is on the Business Daily. We also have a weekly review here by the Daily, and they have a very interesting photo there. If you can have it. They go with Uncle Sam or A, just to read a caricature that looks like President William Ruto wearing a hat and having the colors of the flag of the United States of America. So they go with various American interests have converged in favor of President Ruto. Widely have converged in favor of President Ruto, widely viewed as the West's favorite African leader. In the wake of new global alliances, the Kenyan president is expected to play a strategic role in the nuanced tango of diplomacy and international trade. Is he Washington's new mouthpiece in Africa? Is the weekly review there.
Okay. And I think it's fair now we can cross the border. Let's cross the border to Uganda. And on the main daily there, the Daily Monitor, the big headline, crackdown nets rogue airport security officers. Crime to suspected extortionists arrested after netizens opened war on social media, claiming the practice is widespread and tarnishes the image of uniformed forces and Uganda to visitors transiting through the country's only international airport in Entebbe. And that's a big headline in Uganda this morning. Crackdown nets rogue airport security officers. The other stories are not really major, so tunaweza kuvuka boda twende Tanzania.
And in Tanzania, the Citizen, Tanzania is striving to become Africa's conference center. And they say that in 2022 alone, the country hosted 18 conferences at both the Arusha-based AICC and the Julius Nyerere International Convention Center in Dar es Salaam, earning the parastatals a combined 18 billion Tanzanian shillings on revenues for the financial year ending June 2023. And so they also put out that the government has outlined plans to increase its share. The Citizen on the front page of The Citizen. So the government has outlined plans to increase its share of the continent conference tourism business and also become a hub for international events in the next 5 years. More on that is on page 2. They also quote a number of percentages for different countries. The countries which are dominating Africa's international conference business, ranked by number of events and market share percentage. Kenya is apparently not actually featuring in this. South Africa about 55, that's 32%. Morocco 17%, 30. Rwanda has 22, that is about 13%. Egypt 12%, that's about 21, and Tanzania 10%. Yes. Finally, Bagamoyo Economic Zone to gobble up 11 trillion Tanzanian shillings. Of the amount required at the Special Economic Zone, 1.6 trillion Tanzanian shillings is for the establishment of key infrastructure such as roads, water and electricity. That is on The Citizen this morning.
Tuangalie gazeti la Mwananchi kule Tanzania. Habari kuu pale, siri uteuzi wa majaji kibao. Rais Samia Suluhu Hassan aeleza mambo yaliyomsukuma kufanya hivyo, akiweka angalizo la kupunguza mzigo mara wanapostaafu. Ataja kibarua kilichopo Wizara ya Mambo ya Nje. And Daktari Biteko aanza kuziweka mguu sawa TANESCO EWURA. I think President Samia Suluhu Hassan in Tanzania has appointed a huge group of new judges. Habari zingine ambazo zimepewa kipaumbele kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Mwananchi: bei ya korosho, maji vya msubiri Samia Mtwara, na kwingineko shilingi trilioni 11 kutekeleza mradi Bagamoyo. Remember, these are Tanzanian shillings, 11 trillion shillings. I don't think we are yet able to comprehend that kind of amount in Kenyan shillings. Well, hayo ndiyo mambo ambayo yamepewa kipaumbele kule Tanzania. Turejee nyumbani tuangalie masuala ya karakacha.
Katika masuala ya karakacha on page 18 on the Daily Nation. You love this one, Fred. A number of toothbrushes, one written car tax, another on swimming pool tax, another on loans tax. Then I can't know which one it is. Then is 18%. Fred, you can help us with that.
Okay.
That is on page 18. Another toothbrush there, written tax, with two caricatures there, two gentlemen trying to squeeze out toothpaste. The lid of the toothpaste, it's open, but it is still bulging with the mouth, and it is worried. All these toothbrushes want, the toothpaste is actually labeled a taxpayer toothpaste.
Everyone wants something.
Everyone wants something. Thank you, Fred.
Okay. So a reminder of the question linked to this: what are you doing to cope with a rising cost of living now that the taxpayer is set to be squeezed even more? Everyone expects something from VAT and other things. On the Standard this morning, this is Matters Foreign Affairs. We have there Stalin, Putin, and Kim, and basically talking about the rise of another Stalinist or Putinist kind of leader in Kim Jong-un of North Korea. They're trying to draw parallels in their style of leadership there. Joseph Stalin being one of the most recognizable former leaders of the USSR. And Putin, the current president of Russia. Kim Jong-un was in Russia the other day and invited Putin back to North Korea. So Matters international diplomacy and drawing parallels between those leaders there.
On People Daily, which page is it for today?
People Daily, page 10 on the People Daily, speaks about taxes as well. New proposed taxes, a huge wheelbarrow tire riding over the heads of common mwananchi there. This is matters to do with the cost of living as well. The kind of demand being loaded over the general public in Kenya today. And remember our question: what are you doing to cope with the high cost of living? Yes, we've talked about the high cost of living. We know it is there. We're talking about even new fuel prices today. But what are you doing to cope with this? Kindly share your creative ways. Are you skipping a meal? Are you, are you changing where you live? Are you moving to a cheaper house? What are you doing to cope with the current high cost of living? Continue interacting with us on social media at TV47 News on X, TV47 Kenya on Facebook. Remember, just after the break, we'll be having this discussion with a youth perspective, on the youth perspective, as we continue to take stock of President William Ruto's performance since he took oath of office on the 13th of September 2022. It is now a year and 2 days since he did that. And on the youth perspective this morning, we're having Gishuki Weru, that's a national youth spokesperson at the TSP party, Eric Mongai, political analyst, and Wendy Aura, governance enthusiast. Do stand by for that. You're watching Morning Cafe. Morning Cafe on TV47 with me, Fred Indimuli, and I'm just tweeting about the youth perspective. That's a discussion we're just about to have. This morning we have in studio Gichuki Weru, National Youth Spokesperson, TSP, and Eric Mungai, political analyst. Good morning, gentlemen. Karibuni sana.
Good morning to you.
We're still hoping that Wendy Aura, governance enthusiast, will be joining us as we continue with this conversation. Now, of course, the big headline has to do with the fuel prices this morning. EPRA released this very late yesterday. They tried as much as possible to ensure it was not on the front pages, but the Nation managed to have it on the front page. I do not understand how the Standard missed this, because they do have the advertisement on the inside pages. I don't see if at all there was any other bigger news than this. Now petrol hits 210 per litre. We've been talking for quite a long time about the price of petrol getting to the 200 shilling mark. It appeared like a joke. Earlier, I think sometime last year, we were at 120. And once we got to 150, we thought, oh yeah, we're getting close to 200, but not yet. Then we got to 179, 194, and now a 16 shilling hike, the price of a litre of super petrol. Kerosene, hardest hit, a rise of 33 shillings per litre to 202 shillings. Gentlemen, let's start from there. And our question this morning, we're asking how people are dealing with the high cost of living. This kind of hike will definitely impact on Kenyan households directly, whether it is transport, because matatus will have to hike fares, whether you're fueling your own car. It will impact on the cost of electricity. And this VAT is still at 16%. There's a proposal that it could go up to 18%, which will further hike that prices, the fuel prices. But because this whole week we've been looking at the 1 year of President William Ruto's presidency, and we're looking at the issues that affect this country and the hits and misses of the Kenya Kwanza administration. When it comes to fuel prices, let's start with you, Mungai. Do you feel that this government has approached the issue of fuel in the best way possible? Remember, President William Ruto from the onset said he will not go the subsidy way. That he will subsidize production but not consumption. So no subsidy for fuel. Do you think this government has handled the issue of fuel prices the correct way?
Thank you, Indimuli. First to say good morning to our viewers. It's always a privilege to share this time with them in the morning. And you know, one of the questions you asked when you are entering is how Kenyans are coping with the high fuel and high cost of living. And you know, nowadays, you know, if you come from Ruiru now is the is the focal point in terms of where you live. And I've discovered if you live in Ruiru and you manage to walk to bypass, the fare tends to come down.
Okay.
So
that's the secret in Ruiru.
So that's the secret in Ruiru. and you know, it's also in Ruiru where we are buying cooking oil at lower prices, at least according to the CS. But coming to your question on the issue of how the Kenya Kwanza government has handled the issue of fuel, I'll say this is a very tricky moment for not just Kenya, but actually for a majority of the countries globally. And this is because, you know, sometimes when major countries sneeze, we ourselves on this side tend to catch a cold. You know, there is a war going on in Russia, which has constrained resources. We have the issue of the oil producing and exporting countries, making sure that they cut production so that prices, you know, it's the issue of demand and supply. But I think by and large, the issue of cutting subsidies for the government was a good idea. You know, an audit was done. And when they did the audit, they found out that some of the companies that were asking for refund in billions of shillings, some of them had not even supplied fuel worth 100 million. And so there was some level of corruption even in the subsidies. But I think this is a headache for the government. They need to crack this, because the more prices go up in terms of fuel, it has a ripple effect on other consumer goods. And therefore, I think the government is treading a dangerous path. They need to find a way to make sure that they cushion Kenyans against the high cost of living. Whether we name it subsidy or whether we name it, name notwithstanding, we can call it whatever we need to call it, but I think there is need to cushion Kenyans against the high cost of living.
Yes, and it's purely and solely the role of this government to do so, because the suggestion that it can only be pain, whether we like it or not, that there are no two ways about it, it has to be pain, really, cannot be the reason why we elected a new administration. The fact that, yes, there are prevailing situations globally, it is still up to the Kenyan administration, which made promises to ensure that Kenyans have an easier time, to actually guarantee that. The fact that this government is not doing it, and it appears, because even according to the EPRA Director General, the high pump prices are outside the government's control. Should we just sit back and say, okay, fine, we have a president, we have an administration, but we'll just have to feel the pain?
Okay, thank you so much, my friend Dimuli, for inviting me here first. And I tell our fans as the TV47 that we are going to have a good time here and as we debate. So for the fuel prices, I think as you have said that the government is elected to bring solutions in a country. You cannot say, as a government, you cannot say, you know, the fuel prices are high in other countries, all those shenanigans, you know, there is this war in Russia, there is this war in Ukraine. You cannot always say that, because when a government is elected into office, you are brought into office to bring a solution. So even in high school, in other people who are like a principal in a high school, you cannot say that this school was doing badly, other schools are doing badly, so that is why we are doing badly. You are there so that you can bring a solution. So I think the government must come up with a solution. And whether, as my friend has said, whether it's going to bring back the subsidies or whatever they are going to do as a government, because we have parliament, we have the ministers, they have to come up with a solution. Because when the president was sworn in last year with the deputy president, he said that a village boy has become the president. So what we are asking is that is his fellow village boys in the village in course enjoying this government. And that is why we come about the cost of living. And this, when you raise the fuel prices, the cost of living goes up. And you know that our country, so many people are facing challenges. So when you increase the fuel, you get that so many people are using our matatus, they are using the transport that we use so that they can go to work. So when you increase the fuel prices, you mean that so many people are even going to work on foot because they cannot, even if you are paying 50 bob, it will come to 80 bob or 100 bob. This is the remaining 50 bob, which you are remaining with, is what you are doing to buy lunch with. So the moment that the cost of fare has gone up, it has doubled, you mean this guy will say, let me wake up at 4 so that by 6 I can be at my workplace because I don't want to use this fare so that I can remain with something to eat. And that is the same way even in the goods, because this fuel is the one which is used to transport these goods. So if you are buying your goods at, let's say, at 5,000 or a bag of 5,000. So when the fuel prices goes up, you mean that this bag you're going to buy it at 8,000 or 10,000. So you mean that so many hustlers, which this government came into place with, are going to remain jobless, or they leave this, they get away from this business because the fuel has gone up. The goods they were being brought with these vehicles, with these lorries, they cannot be able to sustain or to buy them anymore. And the cost of electricity goes up because we need the fuel in the production of this electricity. So we meet that the hustlers who this government came into place with are going to suffer so much when it comes to fuel, because the rich are not going to suffer. They don't care about the fuels going up. They are okay with it. But the backdrop of this government, which are the young people who are the hustlers, they need to take care of them and find a solution in this agenda.
Okay. Mungai, you talked about the issue of subsidy, and if arose by any other name, still arose, that any intervention in the form of subsidized fuel prices, any intervention to actually bring or contain the price a little bit for the sake of Kenyans would be welcome. But if at all the main issue was corruption, don't you think that probably the government should have focused more on ensuring that they seal those loopholes instead of doing away with the much-needed subsidies altogether? Why is the government reluctant to tackle corruption head-on, if at all that's the only thing, that's the only way to ensure that you can cushion Kenyans?
I'll tell you something, Fred, for a fact. And one of those things is that the reason why I'm particularly concerned about the high cost of fuel and the fact that this is not, actually I believe this is the beginning. I do not think, when I was growing up, my father used to own a Peugeot 504. Is it 405 or 504? One of the two. And that time I remember fuel was around 60 shillings. And he still used to complain that fuel, the price of fuel is very high. If he were alive today and woke up and found that fuel is 212, I don't know what he would say. But why I'm concerned about the high prices is because it leads to inflation. Now, inflation has been known to bring down governments. And one of the governments that has been brought down by inflation was the Sri Lanka government. You know, prices went very high. Then there was shortage of fuel because they could not get dollars. You remember part of the reason why the government brought in this whole issue of government-to-government buying of fuel was to save on the dollar. We are making payments, I think, this coming week. And therefore, I believe government must be very sensitive to this issue of cost, because even in France right now, every week, because of the high cost of living, France is becoming ungovernable. And therefore, we must not believe that we live in isolation and that the things that are happening out there might not have an impact on what is happening in our country. Now, as I said, and as you correctly put it, Aros by any other name is still Aros. And I believe that it is in government's best interest to seal the loopholes that sometimes the oil marketers use to stifle and steal from Kenyans' pockets, because that has been a major issue. For instance, if you're an oil marketer and you have an allocation of fuel, how does the government monitor the overhanded oil marketers in terms of what you sold, in terms of volumes, how much stock you're still holding? So there is always a loophole and people can get away with stealing from Kenyans. And therefore, I believe that if the government-to-government deal had been handled very well, and I believe there is still room for improvement with regard to that, I believe the prices would have come a bit lower. And therefore, government must find a way, and even if that way is changing the name, because, you know, sometimes, Fred, what we have, sometimes there are political consequences. Because you're transiting from the former government to this new government, sometimes you do not want to inherit. And you know, while you're campaigning, you're demonizing what the other regime was doing. So when you come into power, you do not want to be seen as if you're perpetuating that which you are against. But sometimes, you know, you must come to an understanding that ultimately, whether the former regime or this regime, the Kenyans are still the same people. It's just a change of head of government and state. And therefore, we can stop calling it subsidy. We can go ahead and give it a very nice name and make it look like it is an invention of the Kenya Kwanza government.
Something named different.
Something named different. We can have a good press briefing, good colors. And you know, so long as we cushion Kenyans from astronomical high cost of living, anything is welcome.
Okay.
But I also want to say that sometimes you cannot over-cushion your own citizens, because then it blinds them from the realities of the world. Now remember, the challenge with subsidies is that it is still your own money. So you're paying tax, part of that money is being kept aside to subsidize something else. And therefore, the reason why subsidies must be temporal, it cannot be a permanent solution. So what government needs to do is to find a permanent solution, which is very difficult because we don't produce petrol here or fuel. We killed our own industries in Mombasa, so we have to rely on imports. Now, so long as we are importing inflation, then cost will always remain high. But either we decide to move to completely clean energy and make sure that we reduce the taxes that come with clean energy, so that Kenyans can then afford and be able to transition. Or then we agree that this is a devil that will stay with us for a long time, and we decide how we want to exercise it.
Okay, one of those suggestions for a long-term solution is what the kind of conversation we were having during the Africa Climate Summit, with the president driving in that small electric vehicle or contraption, if I may call it that. And his suggestion earlier in the year that even for the boda riders and businessmen, he would introduce the electric motorbikes. Yet we still cannot escape this argument that fuel still remains at the center of all these things we're discussing, including the cost of electricity. We will still go around and come back to the cost of fuel because we, to some extent, we still use fuel to generate electricity. This kind of solutions, we cannot see any short-term solution that could actually save us this away from subsidies.
You know, Idimuri, that is what we call, I think it is, because we can call it being over-ambitious. Because you can, just because we have been, the president said we are going to have some electric motorbikes. I don't know how many they are, and I don't know where, if today I want to buy an electric motorbike, I don't know where I can go to get it. Because we were told that they were in Mombasa or somewhere, but I have not seen one which has been bought by somebody, or the car that the president was driving. It was a good show. I supported him, but that cannot be the solution to what we are facing today. Because how many electric vehicles do we have in Kenya? How many have been brought in Kenya? So it's just a tiny thing that, and I think the president is trying to do what is, I think he's trying to do to slow down the anger on Kenyans by bringing such solutions. But these are solutions which cannot be sustained because as a country, Kenya, we have not reached in that stage. Because these electric motorcycles, these vehicles, they are not in the country. We cannot be able to sustain them because even we know that you can stay for 2 days without electricity. You can stay for 1 week without electricity because, like where I come from, in Mukurweini constituency, Nyeri County, sometimes it takes electricity goes, it comes back. So how are we going to sustain these motorcycles and these electric cars I don't know how we all know how the game that KPLC plays with that. We know they can say that even they don't give us, they tell us tomorrow we are going to...
Kenya Power deserves its own discussion.
Yeah, so we can, that cannot be a solution to what we are facing today. We have to agree that fuel is what we require as a country today, is what we use in our daily activities. And the government has to come with a solution. With it, a long-term solution or a short-term solution. Sometimes the government can come with a short-term solution so that the citizens can not suffer as we prepare to come with a long-term solution. So let us deal with these fuel prices. Let us deal with this thing called fuel. Let us not start, the president should not start talking about, we have electric vehicle, we have an electric boda. Let us deal with these fuel prices. Let us know how they are going to come down so that the cost of living can come down.
Back to that discussion, Mungai, about subsidies and the fact that you may decide to call it anything else. The fact that this administration is struggling too much to distance itself from projects or other ideas that were there in the last administration. And I'm just referring to the bottom strip of the Daily Nation this morning. And the kind of the cost that we're incurring simply because of that attempt to distance this administration from the previous one. And the kind of things that we are seeing, don't you think that this will actually cost us more? Look at the issue like the Huduma number. It was a 10 billion shilling project, but the new administration says no, we will not pursue that because we do not like it. So they come up with their own 1 billion shilling project called the Maisha number. Exact same thing, but simply because they want to distance themselves. Police uniforms is something else. They're even removing the Liwatoni floating bridge that cost close to 2 billion shillings. The Green Park terminus in Nairobi is being destroyed because it would appear it was a Uhuru legacy project. If the government is willing to lose all this money simply because they want to distance themselves and to appear like they're not linked at all to the other, the last administration, definitely we are lying to ourselves. Because some of these issues can actually be resolved much easier if at all you can spend all this money or allow all this money to go to waste.
You know, Fred, I usually say there is no divorcing politics and economics. If you have bad politics, you have bad economics. And it's interesting to note that the Daily Nation has a list of around 5 projects that might actually go to waste. And when you look at them, Especially like look at the Huduma number. You remember the former CS for interior security threatening Kenyans that, you know, we must take up the number, and there were long queues. We gave out our details. You know, government has something called IPRS. And IPRS typically, when you go to a mobile app and you borrow a loan, part of what you're using as background information is IPRS, because an IPRS is a shared platform across the financial network. It's government data. So if Indimuli's ID number is there, then there are pretty much other details that are there. And what I feel sometimes is that we have governments driven by tenderpreneurs. And even not just this issue of Huduma number, you know, we now have a one government pay bill number. We had some controversy regarding the eCitizen digital platform. There were private players and there was the public sector. The private players decided to sue government. And this is not just a problem of the national government. It's bad politics even in our county governments, where you find one governor has come up with a project, and then you consequently find that the next governor, because they do not want the previous governor to take credit, they abandon the project and they start new projects, which they are unlikely to finish in their term, and then you have another government doing the same. It's the same thing with CDF. You find that one member of parliament dedicated the CDF towards building a certain primary school. Now, when the new member of parliament comes in, they decide that, you know, if I proceed with this, the former MP might take credit and they might actually get to defeat me next time. So what do? You abandon. But I think we must move away as a country, and especially because we are here as young people, we must find new ways of doing things. And the thing is, if you finish a primary school that was started by your predecessor, the beneficiary are the Kenyan public. It's not you as a member of parliament. What you might get is a token of glory that you, and I feel sometimes it's an issue of communication. You can tell people that the former MP was unable to start. Had failed to finish. But now I'm the new guy, I'm the new kid on the block, and I assisted him to finish this block. Because at the end of the day, it is the Kenyan public that gets to benefit. I think this is bad manners that has been carried all the way from the MCA level to the national government level. And especially what irks me is this issue of Huduma number vis-a-vis Maisha number, police uniforms. I think sometimes when we allow tenderpreneurs to lead government agenda, because the issue is this, as a police officer, just think about it. What exactly do I need? Is it a new uniform or is it better terms of service? Or maybe is a uniform part of better terms of service?
Maybe they make them warmer.
But what we are having in existence, if the issue is maybe an issue of coldness or warmness, couldn't we then make the material that we are using right now to be a bit warmer? I therefore feel that there are better things that we could do. But equally in Ndimuli, we must also say that there were projects that were done by the previous governments, which really was a waste of money. Like this Green Park terminus, experts had told the government it's not viable, because then you're going to have a constraint in terms of flow of traffic in that particular area. But the government disregarded all advice and went ahead to do it. Even this floating ferry, there was the Sunday Nation carried a headline some time back saying that people are no longer using that bridge. They still preferred, because the bridge was constructed very many kilometers away from where people use on foot. So some of those projects were outrightly bad. You know, you can tell it was a waste of taxpayers' money. But unfortunately for our system, you can always get away with it.
Okay. Gishuki, on this issue of doing away with projects that cost the taxpayer a lot of money, just to delink yourself from the previous administration.
I think, as my brother said, I think that we should come with a law that if you come in as a new government, you first have to finish the projects that were started by the previous government. If you're an MCA, if you're an MP, if you're a governor, you have come in as a governor, you defeated the other person. You have to finish the county projects which were started by the other governor. Because you meet that an MCA will come just because the previous MCA had started Maraminga Road. Then the other MCA will come and say, now, he cannot continue with it because he thinks the previous MCA will say, I'm the one who started this, and it's like, it's my project. So we have to come along and say, we have to come up with a law and say, if you're coming in as a government, first finish the previous government's projects which were not finished. We have so many projects which were started during the Uhuru Kenyatta government, which were good, and I think the president of this country, the Honorable William Ruto, should first finish these projects. But during campaigns, it's a different way, because when you're campaigning, because I was one of the people who were vying for a political seat, it's just like I can say, it's just like wooing a lady. So you go and tell a lady all the sweet names, all the sweet things that she wants to hear, so that you can demonize the other people who want your lady. So that is what the government was doing. They have to say, this Huduma number is not good. It's not good for the people of Kenya.
But we'll give you something equivalent.
Yeah, but now when they come back, they cannot say that we are going to bring back the Huduma number. They have to come with another name so that they cannot be seen like supporting the other government.
Hold that thought. It is time for us to take a break. We'll continue with this discussion. And when we return, we'll be talking and looking more at the hits and misses of the William Ruto administration 1 year and 2 days later. You're watching Morning Cafe. Morning Cafe with me, Fred Ndimuli, on TV 47. And just before we go back to our discussion, let's take a look at the top story this morning. Kenyans are this morning waking up to hiked fuel prices, as released late last night by the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority, EPRA. The updated pump prices in Nairobi are as follows. Super petrol will now be sold at 211 shillings and 64 cents a litre. Diesel, 200 shillings and 99 cents a litre, and kerosene, the worst heat or the hardest heat, at 202 shillings 61 cents a litre. This represents an increase of 16 shillings 96 cents a litre for super petrol. Diesel increased by 21 shillings 32 cents a litre, and kerosene by 33 shillings and 13 cents a litre. And so this morning we ask, what are you doing to cope with the high cost of living? What are you doing to cope with the high cost of living? Continue interacting with us on social media, on X at TV47 News, and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya. I'm still in studio with my panelists, Gichuki Weru. Yes, Gichuki Weru, National Youth Spokesperson, TSP, and Eric Mungai, political analyst. Gichuki, I know we ended with you, but TSP is part of Kenya Kwanza.
Yeah, very true.
Yes. So as we are gauging the performance of Kenya Kwanza administration, we are gauging your performance as well, 1 year on. Now, the main issue has been the kind of promises that Kenya Kwanza made during the campaigns last year. The fact that so many things were promised, one among them that the high cost of living would come down within 6 months. The cost of unga initially was immediately, within 30 days. It moved to, I think, 3 months. It moved to 6 months, then it went to 1 year. We've already crossed the 1 year mark. The cost of unga is not down. The cost of sugar has almost doubled. It's now over 200 shillings for a 2 kilogram pack. Many other promises. The 2/3 gender rule, the president made a promise that within 12 months he would have sorted out that. He even made a promise that he would reserve 50% of cabinet positions to women within 12 months. The 12 months ended 2 days ago. So many other things that he made promises about that are yet to be implemented. Is this what you're talking about just before the break, about wooing a woman, and then once mengia box, you totally forget about what you had promised? Is that the case with this administration?
Okay. You know that, Idimuli, that as a government, you cannot do all those things in 1 year. And as I told you, during campaigns, you understand, even if you, because I know maybe one day you're going to vote for a political seat, you have to tell people what they want to hear. So when the government is...
Lie to them?
Okay, not lying really, but
what would you call
so
it?
that you can win a seat, you first have to tell people what they want to hear.
Mislead,
maybe you are going
misinform?
not misinform. You don't have to tell them that we are not going. When we come
maybe
to government,
exaggerate.
Yeah, maybe you exaggerate, but you have to tell first you have to tell people what they want to hear. And this the manifesto, you have to tell them within 1 year we are going to do this, within 2 years we are going to do this. But these things we are not going to accomplish them within 1 year. Maybe in 5 years or maybe in 4 years we are going to accomplish. But when you are telling, if you come here and tell a person that, the cost of living will come down after 3 years, they are not going to elect you. So the first agenda for any person who is surviving for a seat or for any government, for any political outfit that wants to win a seat is first to tell people what they want to hear. And what they want to hear is this manifesto. And you have to make this manifesto look like it is going to be accomplished within a very short term period.
Nikiweka Biblia chini.
Nikiweka Biblia chini. So, just as I told you, so that if you tell a lady that, I'm going to marry you I'm going to buy you a vehicle, I'm going to buy you a shamba, we are going to build a house, she will accept you. But you cannot do all those things within a very short period. But finally, eventually, you're going to buy her the house, you're going to buy her the vehicle, you're going to buy her the shamba. It may take like 5 years or 10 years, but when you are talking to her, you have to tell her it will be done within like 1 year. But you are going to do those things. So this government, I hope that as Kenyans, we can give it time. It has its undoings, it has its hits and misses, but I think the hits I can rate it out of 10. I can rate it as at 6 out of 10. But we all know each government has those things. They have those difficulties. We know we have the debt which was in the former government. The president is trying all he can to repay this debt as he takes other debts, because as you have seen, I think he has borrowed almost 2 billion from World Bank and IMF.
And it's curious. Allow me to bring in Mungai in this discussion. Mungai, it's very curious that 1 year later, anytime this administration wants to justify its failure in one thing or another, they quickly go back to the previous administration, what the last administration did. This is not the first presidency we're having. We've had presidents before who've transitioned, who've replaced, who've succeeded governments. We had a situation where back in 2002, 2003, Mwai Kibaki came in after 24 years of President Daniel Moi's rule. And within 7 days, President Mwai Kibaki was able to implement perhaps one of the most life-changing education movements in Kenya by introducing free primary education. The fact that we are still complaining that 1 year later, this government has not been able to offer any direct relief to Kenyans. Surely, aren't Kenyans justified in their lack of trust in some of the promises this government is making even now?
You know, Fred, mambo ni matatu. Kungoja, kungoja na kungoja. But you know, the reality of life is, no matter how much you're in a hurry to get a baby, the truth is there is time within which that can happen, regardless of how much you're in a hurry. And I think this is the analogy that is being used by Kenya Kwanza government to say the fact that I know you want reforms now, I know you want changes now, but look, there is always a time within which transformation happens. And I believe that is the analogy that they are using. Of course, you know, sometimes politically, if something does not work as quickly, it's always easier to find a scapegoat in terms of another person who did not get their job done correctly and in their time. But the truth is that the previous regime did fumble a lot in terms of policies, and it takes a bit of time to correct that. But 1 year now moving down the line, I think we need to discard that narrative now about the previous government. The cabinet secretaries are now settled in office. I believe every cabinet secretary now knows. You know, some of them, when they got into power, did not even believe they were cabinet secretary. Unasikia unaitwa waziri, mpaka wewe mwenyewe unasema haya. You mean mimi ni waziri? So I think now they have settled. The PSAs have settled. And I believe now we need to discard, as Kenya Kwanza, we need to discuss the narrative about the former regime. We need to get our house in order, which we and I say we because I am a member of the UDA party. I'm actually a life member, not just a member. It's okay. Important to qualify the life part.
Very important.
Of key importance. So I believe that it's important we now need to discard that narrative about the former regime. We need to work for our people and get concerted efforts to make sure that we deliver what we promised. Of course, as a politician, when you are on the podium, chances are very high that the public will only respond to things that are of interest to their heart. But the truth is about governance, you have constraint of resources. Even if you wanted to do everything at once, you find there is a budgetary process and you have constraints even within the terms of revenue that you collect. You find that you cannot do all the things that you promised. So you have to take a few of them. And you remember when Kibaki took over in 2002, one of the best things that happened in this country was that there was a lot of optimism. You know, for the first time the country came together. You remember that time, Fred, we used to arrest policemen ourselves. Mm-hmm. If we find a traffic policeman taking bribes, you know, people would get out of the matatu, arrest the police officer and take them to the nearest police station. And there were even some findings that found out that Kenyans were amongst the most optimistic and happiest people in the world. But you know, with this government, the difference was only 200,000 votes. And it tells you that the country was divided right the middle. And so the president has to walk down a path of one trying to unite the country, which is a very difficult task, I can tell you. And then also you have to get to go to work within the constraints that you have. But I believe, as I said, there is still time. The conception has happened. We have to go to clinics, find out how this baby called development is performing. Sometimes we find the head is staying like this. We have to make a few adjustments. And hopefully by the end of the 5 years, we'll have delivered a happy, bouncing baby. That is the desire of everyone. And I hope that we can get that desire to the doorstep of every Kenyan. Okay.
A lot of things have happened this week. Of course, we were marking 1 year since President William Ruto took oath of office. Then Treasury released the medium-term strategy on the kind of taxation that we should be expecting in the next budgetary cycle. And it talked about an increase in VAT, introduction of fresh taxes on farmers, on so many other things. And this coming after a controversially passed finance bill that was pushed down the throats of Kenyans, because even the public participation conducted, none of the views were taken into consideration, and Parliament had to do what the president decided. There's a lot of pain, and looking at the headlines yesterday, they were talking about pain, even before the fresh fuel prices. That means more pain. And this analogy of pain has become very consistent, that the Kenya Kwanza administration appears to be telling the Kenyans that there will be pain for some time, then probably relief later. This is the same administration that promised to do things in quick succession, but failed to do so. How should we, or why should we believe that after this same administration, that after the pain we're experiencing now, there will be relief?
You know, the president, when he was giving his first speech when he was elected, he said about borrowing of the loans. And he said that instead of borrowing, he's going to advocate for more revenue collection among the citizens. That is what we call the taxes are going up, instead of borrowing, so that they can be paying. They will be paying for a few days or for some few years, but afterwards it will be joy and happiness. Because, Fred, we cannot be, as a country or as Africa at large, we cannot be borrowing money each and every time. You know, the problem with the African countries is that, so that they want to make their citizens happy. You meet a president, keeps on borrowing money, and you know what happened with a country like Ghana. You know what happens with other countries that borrow money. You borrow money from this World Bank, from IMF, from other countries, and they come and take your properties. And that is what was happening in the previous regime. You mean that the previous government was borrowing a lot of money. Even you mean that this money that they are borrowing, us as citizens are the ones who are going to pay it after all, or our children. You mean like a child who is born today has something to pay as a debt in our country. So life will go down if you borrow, but afterwards, what are the long term? What will happen afterwards? You mean that the country after some years, we are not going to be owning our airports, we are not going to be owning our ports, we are not going to be owning some of our roads that which the Chinese are taking over. So you mean that it will come a place that we can enjoy for some time, for some years, but afterwards we are going to find ourselves in so many problems. So that is what the president is trying to tell Kenyans, that let us advocate for more revenue collection. Let us tax ourselves. Let us go to work so that everybody can be able to pay tax. Let us increase our tax bracket so that we can have so many areas where we can get money from, instead of borrowing loans from other countries, so that even as Africans or as a country, we can become dependent on ourselves, or we can become independent. Because the moment you keep on borrowing from China, you borrow from America, you borrow from World Bank, you borrow from IMF, at the long last, it will be a disaster in our country. So I support the president when he taxes citizens. It will just take some like 3 to 4 years, but afterwards, I think Kenyans will come to realize what the president was doing was the right thing.
And of course, I'm sure by 2027, the taxes will go down, just before the elections.
Yeah, you know, okay, we are, that is what we are going to start enjoying.
Politics.
that is good politics after all. Because okay. Even we saw the former regime, they tried to sell us 100 more bunga during the last election, during the last few days.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there's a conversation that many people appear reluctant to have with this increased revenue collection. Is the same way, even if you borrow money, it is a similar conversation that would be required. Conversations around corruption. The fact that, yes, you may collect, you may widen the tax base, you may include so many people into the tax bracket, but the governance of these resources remains wanting. Are you confident that enough is being done to ensure that this money will be governed correctly? Remember, Kenya Kwanza has not been talking about corruption as one of the key agenda of fighting corruption. If I'm wrong, kindly correct me.
Well, first is to say the issue of corruption is really a thorn in the flesh, especially for some of us that actually pay taxes, and some of us who, you know, when you get your pay slip, you can see several deductions have gone to your pay slip. And therefore, corruption is a big thorn in the flesh. And I must say that it's not that corruption is not in the agenda of the Kenya Kwanza government. In fact, you remember already there is a PS who has been sacked out of the debacle that was the mosquito net scandal in KEMSA. You remember we've had to overhaul the whole KEMSA board. But I believe that the biggest challenge, especially with regard to fighting corruption, and in my opinion, and the biggest irony I have found is that for the last, I think now 10 or so years, the men at the helm of the Anti-Corruption Commission have been men of the cloth. And my expectation would be that they would really seek guidance from the Lord, and they would, you know, the king does not hold the sword in vain.
As a solution to corruption?
Not necessarily. I'm just saying, you know, the irony is, what we've had at the helm of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission are men of the cloth. And you see, men of the cloth, when we go to church on Sunday, part of what is inculcated to us in terms of value system is that corruption is bad. And therefore, the expectation is that they would crack the whip on the corrupt government officials so that we have a country that is able to move forward. And I agree they have made some strides. Like you can see in the Daily Nation today, there is this man that used to work at City Hall is now worth around $1 billion, and he cannot explain his sources. But we also want the big fish, you know, sort of baying for blood. We also want to see the big names go down in terms of corruption. Sacking is not just enough. We want to see some people hanging at the noose, big men, so that we can see actually we are making strides towards fighting corruption. I believe what this government needs to do is that, one, is that we need to, in terms of fighting corruption, we need to bring it down fast. Because the challenge sometimes when we speak about eradicating corruption, Transparency International have a corruption index. And in that corruption index, you still find even the most developed countries as part of that. It's only that sometimes the African governments tend to be first on the list. So the issue is to minimize corruption to a level that does not even affect the common man. For instance, at the Immigration Department, something as simple as a passport. You see, you're asking me money for a passport. Now, I am a young man who wants to travel to whichever country to go and seek for a job because the opportunities here are few and far in between. Then when I come to seek for a passport from a government officer who receives a salary every month without fail, then they're asking me for more money. And even when I bribe them, it is not a guarantee that they will actually issue me with a passport. And therefore, you see, when the level of corruption gets to a point where it affects the common man, then we have a big problem as a country. Because, you know, sometimes when you read the newspaper headline and you see maybe Kimorel, I've seen somewhere Kimorel Dame, and you see 22 billion disappeared, you know, for a Kenyan, sometimes they are not able to conceptualize those numbers. You know, 22, most Kenyans will just ignore, you know, that's Kimwarel, maybe it is somewhere in West Pokot, or, you know, most Kenyans will not conceptualize. But when corruption cascades to a level where you cannot get government services in terms of a birth certificate, you cannot get a death certificate, then you know that it has hit the fan. And at that point now is where, you know, the president needs to be very careful. Even as he goes for the big fish, there is also room to go for the small fish, those that affect the daily routine of Kenyans. Because if a traffic officer obstructs me from going to my daily duties, then he is an encumbrance towards me making a living to support my children. Now, his level of corruption then makes sure that my children sleep hungry. Now, that is, to me, that is the biggest corruption that we need to curb. This one of Kimwarel, 22 billion, we just need to hang 2 or 3 people. But what happens to the millions of Kenyans?
Isn't that the equivalent of sending people to the afterlife?
Yes, yes. And in fact, you know, part of what people did not understand when the president said, akiweka Biblia chini, is because sometimes, you know, when you are with the Biblia, you are holding it, you are constrained to the fact that you are holding the holy book and there are some actions you cannot take. But when the book is down, then you are allowed to send people to Zayuni, people who make sure that our life is difficult.
Is that really the approach we want to take? Extrajudicial?
No, not extrajudicial.
Extrajudicial means to handle corruption. Because yes, corruption needs to be tackled. It would appear that the structures we have, the systems we've put in place for years have failed to do so. Well, the president came up with Mambo ni Matatu. Do you think that that kind of approach would probably remedy the situation?
I think I would advocate for that, for the president talking like that. You know, in countries, in African countries, if a president doesn't talk like that, these corrupt guys are just going to be doing what they say. As long as the president will take, we are going to go to the courts, I'm going to bribe the judge, I'm going to bribe the magistrate, then I walk scot-free. Because in the movie we have seen so many people who have stolen public money going to court, they are taken to court, a person has stolen $1 billion, is given a bail of 10 million, then he walks scot-free, and from there, you'll never see him again in court. So if I was the president, if myself, Gachagua, was a president in an African country, I would use some dictatorship in a way so that these people can learn. Because you have to some of these guys are so powerful. They have connections everywhere. They know all the magistrates, they know all the lawyers, they know all the judges, they know all the way to the court and how to get their freedom. So even if you're the president, you say, we are going to rely on our judicial system, these guys are just going to be happy because they know, as an individual, I have all the contacts of all the judges, they are my friends, we drink tea with them, we have lunch together. So even if I'm taken to court, nothing will happen to me. I'm just going to be given a board of 10 million, then I'm going to be walking scot-free in this country. So as a president, you have to come up with such a style, because we cannot be using the same strategy that has been used by the previous governments. And we see these people walking scot-free, buying positions, winning, having expensive cars. So as a president, I support what he said. I will do that, even more than that, if I was a president.
Wow, this is a youth perspective. This is a youth perspective. But the young people,
as a country,
the young people on this panel have decided that we should probably use that route. But let me now come to issues that affect the youth, because that could also be linked to the Kenya Kwanza administration's performance over the last 1 year. And one of those issues I'm looking at is headlining on the front page of the People Daily today, and it has to do with the human rights record. And they're saying, this is the IMLU, the Independent Medical Legal Unit report. Over 128 people killed by police. Whistleblower reveals majority of victims documented this year alone were young male adults aged between 18 and 35 years. And that is the description, the Kenyan description of the youth. All officers are also accused of perpetrating torture, inhuman, degrading treatment or punishment, as well as enforced disappearances. This record should worry the youth, Mungai. The fact that most of those affected are actually young people. We have been experiencing, because this government came on the back of promises, a lot of promises, especially to the youth. Biggest population we have, probably those looking, fighting acute unemployment or facing acute unemployment. They are the majority of the hustler population. So matters youth were going to be at the forefront of this government. Yet we see something like this, where majority of the people or the victims of human rights violations, especially by agents of the state, the police and others, are the same youth. We're also looking at issues to do with the universities and the kind of challenges we're experiencing right now. But let's start with this on human rights violations. Because yes, we're still looking at 1 year of President Ruto's administration.
Thank you, Fred. I remember when the deputy president was campaigning, and specifically the deputy president, who then was a candidate, he used to give an analogy in rallies. And he would say part of what they would do when they got into power was to make sure that they reformed the police, not police force, police service, to an extent that where when you take 1 or 2 drinks, the police officers would escort you home. You know, that was a very prominent promise back then. But it appears that there is a lot of work that needs to be done regarding our police service. because you remember during Kibaki's, and let me just start during Kibaki's time because we are all conversant with what used to happen during Moi's time. There is this UN rapporteur who was sent to Kenya to come and document extrajudicial killings. And then during Uhuru's time is when we had the likes of Rivayala and forced disappearances. And I can see the same trend is now cropping up with this new regime. And I must say and condemn in the strongest terms the use of extrajudicial means, especially with regard to young people. And I must say this, Fred, there has been a historical correlation between, there's some level of animosity between the police and the young people, which I have never understood. If you look at what in Mutaa they call Mariamu, you know, Mariamu is that big police lorry. If you go and count the number of people that are in there, they are young people. And for the longest period of time, it appears that the easiest target for police to extort is to arrest young people, because then either they can give a bribe or they can call their parents or guardians to come in and step in terms of bribery. And also there's a likelihood that when you arrest a young man like me, I might not have contacts to call to be able to bail me out. So my only way out then is to bribe the powers that be. And therefore I must condemn in the strongest terms the use of extrajudicial means to deal with the people who have been, you know, allegedly have committed a crime. But most importantly, there are even those young people whose only crime is to say be in dreadlocks, whose only crime is to be young people. You know, simply because you're young, and there is a law that the colonialist created, which I think the members of parliament need to take to put into consideration to repeal. You know, loitering, drunk and disorderly. If you go to any court on a Monday morning, out of 100 cases on mention, 95% of them are drunk and disorderly. Loitering, you know, you have no intent. You're just loitering around town. I think some of those laws are very archaic. They are overtaken by events, and they have been used for the longest time by police officers to victimize young people. And I must say that the challenge sometimes, you know, when we are young, we do not have, we do not coalesce around each other. So even canvassing our issues becomes very difficult. Unlike women, you know, police don't harass women for the reason that if you harass one, you harass all of them. But you know, for young people like me and Geshoki, if today I'm arrested, Geshoki will disappear and will hide somewhere and be asking, how is Mungai faring? Wherever he is, amewachiliwa ama kumeenda aje. So I think it must be condemned. It must not be entertained. And I want to tell police officers that right now when you commit a crime against an ordinary Kenyan, you carry the cross yourself. We have gone from the times where the IG would stand on a podium and defend rogue police officers. When the day of reckoning and the day of judgment comes, you will be judged as an individual. You will go, we have many police officers who are in committee. So I want to tell those police officers who are used to perpetuate extrajudicial killings that when it is time to carry the cross, even Simon of Cyrene will not be anywhere near. You will carry it alone. Okay.
The president was very emphatic on this issue when he said that never again will cases of extrajudicial killings be the order of the day. Yes, we've seen this effort to actually delink completely from everything that used to happen in the previous administration. Yet this one, actually, according to the IMLO report, the number of cases of extrajudicial killings has doubled over the last 1 year. What happened to that promise?
I would say that is very unfortunate because as I have told you that this government was selected into place by the young people, because I think majority of the young people, the votes that the Kenya Kwanza government got came from the young people, who are the hustlers, the youth, because it rode on an agenda of the youth, and the youth believed in it so much. So what I would say is that it is very unfortunate when we have this government, which is a youth government, in quotes, that it is doing what it is not supposed to be doing to the people who elected them. Even right now, we have a case, if you go on Twitter, we have a case of a young man who was arrested just the other day. He is looking to be bailed with 50,000 just because he wrote false information in course about the deputy president and the MP for Kiharu. So this is a deputy president who said that they are not going to use the police to brutalize people, the young people. And yet we are seeing what was happening during the previous regime of if you write something on Twitter or on Facebook criticizing the government is coming for you. You saw the other day a young lady called Pauline was arrested in Mombasa by the police judge, and she was told, I don't know, she has cocaine or something like that. And that was a false information. She did not have such things because the case was thrown out. These are young people who have just, they are accessing their democratic right of being on Twitter, of being on Facebook and writing. Whether the government, whether you are a young person and you are supporting the opposition, let the government give these young people the chance to advocate for their rights, to speak their minds, so that we cannot have this government that if you write something bad about the president, if you write something bad about the government, then they come for you and they arrest you, just like what was happening. This is a government that cannot be doing such to young people. And as my brother here has said, if you go to even Ushago, uko kwetu, kama uko kwetu, you meet a young person is walking on the road. The young person has gone to work during the whole day. Sasa usiku ameamua, let me go and take something small as I treat myself because I have worked the whole day, or let me go and talk with my fellow friends in the township. Then I go home at around 11 or 12. Then when you're walking on the road, these policemen are coming, they will come and they arrest you. And the next day you are told you are loitering, something will be placed on your pocket, you are going to place baggie on your pocket, and you have never even smoked bang, so that you can remove something small. This is the biggest challenge we have in our country, and we cannot allow that as young people. And I ask that our young elected members of parliament, we have something called the KYPA, which is comprised of young MPs and senators. I don't know what they are doing about this case, because this is one of the things that they should be talking about. I challenge the MP for Madera, because he is the chairman of the KYPA, Eric Wamombi, to do something about this, to find a solution about this. I challenge people like Babu Owino, all these young members of parliament. Let them come with a law or something like that. Just let them find a solution where young people are not going to be jailed, where young people are not going to be brutalized by this government. They have to find a solution. It's a challenge to our young elected members of parliament, our young MCAs, to find a solution to this case.
Okay, let's still move on. Yes?
And you know, Fred, the most unfortunate thing about what he has said is that even when you're charged with drunk and disorderly, and you go and plead guilty, it finds its way to the good certificate of good conduct. It's very unfortunate.
Okay, very unfortunate. But let's stay with this issue of treatment of the youth population by this Kenya Kwanza administration, and the issue of university admissions, whether directly or indirectly. Current policies by this government have left many young people facing deep challenges, especially in accessing university education. I do not know if this is by design or default. Earlier this year, we were talking about the fact that many youth appear disillusioned out of a possible 800,000 who would have qualified for admission to universities and tertiary institutions of higher learning. Only about 200,000 applied, meaning that the rest were not interested, or at least interested, in those positions. Now we're seeing that even those who have applied are facing challenges of funding because of a government policy to change the funding model. Even with those challenges, we are seeing very slow or little response in terms of intervention by the government, in terms of remedying the situation. Do you believe that this government may have at some point dropped its biggest support base in the youth and forgotten about them?
Thank you, Fred. Especially on the issue of education, we must look at it in totality, not in isolation. And I'll take you back to Kibaki's tenure with regard to education reforms. So during Kibaki's tenure is when he came up with a free primary education, and we actually saw enrollment of the students actually go high up. But then a challenge happened in that we went on a spree of opening universities. You remember, like you would have a building, and first floor would be a bar, second floor would be a university college, and third floor would be beauty hair salon and everything and everything. And so we converted every institution that we had to a university college. So what happened is that then we ended up with a lot of graduates who had no technical capacity to do anything. And then we modeled them to come and do white-collar jobs, which, you know, in this economy, they are no longer available. Now, fast forward to Uhuru's time, there was a change of policy and a change of heart. And we saw government start talking more about TVET institutions and, you know, funding TVETs. But we transitioned very well during that particular period. Now, back to this particular government, you can see that there is a major policy shift, especially with regard, if you look at the budgetary allocations, they've actually allocated more towards TVETs. And in my opinion and analysis, it tells me that, you know, government now wants to discourage many people. It may not be an official policy, but it's like government is trying to discourage people from, you know, pursuing that university way to the TVET way, which I think, in my opinion, is a good way, because sometimes, Fred, we have people in this country who even have masters, and they have no jobs. So you go for your undergraduate, then you stay 2 years without a job, you go back to your masters, you know, you keep increasing your level of studies, but there are no jobs forthcoming. And yet, when you look at the TVET sector, when you need a plumber right now, Fred, if in your house you need a plumber, it's a headache getting a good plumber. If you need an electrician, it's a big headache. And therefore, in terms of government shift of policy, I believe that it might not be official, but government is trying to discourage people from going to universities. But that is that. On the issue of costing of university programs, they have introduced a new model, and which I support very much for this simple reason. You know, initially, during Kibaki's tenure, university survived on parallel model. So the more parallel students you had, the high likelihood you are going to stay afloat. Mm-hmm. Now, because government realized that universities were still surviving anyway without exchequer support, it's sort of they abandoned universities. Now, when the parallel students started declining, we started realizing that there was a big hole in funding university education. To an extent now that if you supply a university as a supplier, you're not likely to be paid. And WASU was always going on strikes because they were not even getting salaries. Now, this model is good because based on the number that you bring in and based on the funding model, a university can actually stay afloat because you're assured the money will come either from the parent or not necessarily from government, but from the institutions that are going to fund the student to be in campus. Okay. Now, that is good because we have universities that will not collapse waiting for the exchequer to send them money, which might not be forthcoming. So I think that's a plus. Do we have errors and delays? Like we are having some students don't have IDs. Anytime you implement a new program, that is bound to happen. But the Ministry of Education needs to move up with speed and make sure that we rectify some of these teething problems. But I would advise Kenyans, especially for those that are 18 years and above, let's all try to have a course, you know, a TVET course that can actually allow you to earn a living, as opposed to wanting, you know, the desire to wear a tie and a coat like my good friend Geshuki is a good desire. But in terms of whether that translates to money in your pocket, that's a different conversation altogether. Okay. Yes, so I think we need to have a balance.
But the net effect is that a huge chunk of a particular generation, the ones who, this cohort that was to join university this year, will miss out on university education. That's a huge chunk of the Kenyan youth. We're coming from a time where university education was so accessible to so many different people. Don't you think that this particular cohort will be disadvantaged by, whether intentionally or not, as Mungai says it?
Okay, I don't think they will be disadvantaged because, you know what, as my friend has said, you know what the government is doing is it's like a hidden agenda. Because they have, even if you listen to the deputy president when he was at JKUAT, Jomo Kenyatta University, he was telling the students, congratulations, you have graduated, but there's no work outside. So what they are trying to do is that they want to make sure that the people who are going to join university, they are people who are going to do quality courses that can give them a job. So they don't want just to take everybody to the university so that everybody can get a degree. You have even a degree of a course that cannot get you employment in our country. So what the government is doing is trying to get a small group of people to join university. And they know this, if these people join university, this group, maybe 70% of them will get a job. So because they have realized we take so many students to universities, but after they graduate, there's no work for them. And that is why you find some people, they finish university. We have so many cases, a young person finish university, he cannot find a job. There's no institution which can offer him or her a job because even that course is not needed anymore in such institutions. And you have young people who got degrees, who got masters committing suicide because they cannot get a job. So I think what the government has realized is that all this chunk of people who we are taking to universities, it is bringing a disadvantage to the country and to them. So let us just get a small number. Let us give them quality education of a course which can enable them to get some form of formal employment or some kinds of that, so that the other chunk can go to these TVETs. And if you know, the president of this country has been one of the advocates of TVET colleges and these institutions, so that these other people can go to TVETs, they learn something like plumbing, they learn something about being a mechanic, and these are courses that you can, even if you are seated here, you can be called to go and repair some bulb, you can be called to go and repair some vehicle. These are, the government has realized, if we do this, so many young people are going to be able to employ themselves. Because if you go to university, you do like something like sports management, then you are told to employ yourself. What are you going to do? You cannot do something. But if you go to a TVET and do mechanics, you can be able to go and employ yourself. A vehicle, you always have vehicles which are breaking down. So that is what the government has realized. And I support them so much in this and advocate for this too, as a young person.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other issue that I always like discussing during the youth perspective is the issue of members, elected members to the National Assembly and the Senate, who are elected on the premise that they were young people. We have quite a number of young members of the National Assembly. 1 year on, it is time to also gauge their performance. Do you think that the younger members of the National Assembly are doing justice to the Kenyan youth? Last week we were discussing issues to do with climate change, and one of the younger members was one of those who made a viral video of this young member was made on his understanding about the whole agenda. Do you think that elected members are doing justice to the youth?
You know, you've just reminded me about that member, and I do not want to disassociate. I'll just say that there is room for capacity building in terms of the young members. But most importantly is to say that if we don't nurture our young people now, regardless of whether we perform or not, you're going to have a problem in future, because as the older generation exits, then there will be a vacuum. And I would say that there are areas of improvement. Like for instance, I have just told you that if you look at the issues to do with crime, we need to legislate so that some of these misdemeanors do not find their way to good conduct, which again I need for a job. There are many areas that the young parliamentarians can pick up, even the issue of coffee. Most of the young farmers in the villages and sugarcane farmers, you know, they are young people. Most of the manual laborers that we have around are young people. And therefore, there are diverse areas that we can legislate, and which I think either as a result of lack of capacity building or as a result of lack of public interest, they are not engaging themselves in. But I believe they have, to the extent within which, you know, I saw like my senator in Kiambu wanted to introduce a bill on public holidays to make sure that if it falls somewhere, I think on a weekend, you have like 3 or 4 days. I think there is room to be serious. there is room for us to, you know, to be able to legislate on issues that affect young people, specifically for them to be able to grow economically and socially. But also, most importantly, you know, you have asked how the Kenya Kwanza government has performed in the last 1 year. And Gishuki has given them a rate of 6 out of 10. But I think on the issues of youth and youth appointments, I think out of 10, I would give them a 1.5. because we still have many young people that campaigned for them, many young people that supported them, who are still angling for to be appointed in some of those facilities. And when you look at the people being appointed, then you can actually tell these people are 60 years and above. They have tried, that's why I'm giving them a 1.5. But I think in terms of mentorship and the youth agenda moving forward, there's still a lot that even the Kenya Kwanza government needs to do. Allow the young people to make mistakes, allow us to make mistakes, because mistakes will always be there. That's why there's a learning curve. Sometimes people argue that, when we put a young person there, they will make mistakes. And when they make mistakes, because this is a country affair, if we fail collectively as a country. If we succeed collectively as a country. So let us not be afraid to absorb young people into leadership, to train them, and equally allow them to make mistakes, which they can quickly learn from. And then when it is their time now to be 60 years or 70 years, they will have had the time to exercise leadership, and they will have infused new ideas into the system that can actually assist us to move forward.
We have no business criticizing MP Salasia too much. He should be allowed to make a few mistakes.
He should be allowed. Actually, he should be allowed to make mistakes.
On this issue of young parliamentarians, what's your assessment?
Okay, I always say that when electing a young person, you just don't elect a person just because he's a young person. Electing young people is a very good thing. I vied for a position. I hoped I would be elected. And I always advocate for young people to be elected. But I always call on the citizens to elect a young person we have a history about. Just know, if this is, just put age on a side and say, this is a young person. What are his stance? What does he advocate for? What does he believe in? Does he believe in social democracy? What does he believe in the fight against corruption? Because we have so many young people, so many young leaders who are corrupt, but we also have young leaders who are good. So I would say that for the members of parliament who have been elected, and the senators and the MCAs, the young people, I would say that they are trying, but not much. They can do a lot. Because the other day I was looking at the young members of parliament, they were saying that the Speaker of the National Assembly, that he does not give them a chance to talk. They are taking like what we call monos in high school, because I listened to Caleb Amisi, who is a young member of parliament, and he was talking about how the young members of parliament, they are not considered in parliament in debates. But I have to tell them that this thing that does not come on a silver platter. You cannot just say that the Speaker didn't give me a chance to speak, so I don't know what to do. If you look at South Africa, we had, that is the case scenario in South Africa, where the old men were the ones who were debating, but a new political party called the EFF came with a new analogy. The Speaker tried to deny them a chance to talk, because the EFF is constituted almost 90% of the members of parliament of the EFF, which is led by Julius Malema, are young people. So they caused a lot of chaos in parliament. They have done what they have to do, whether it is causing chaos, whether it's causing discomfort in the parliament, so that they can be given a chance to talk. And the Speaker finds himself or herself in a difficult situation where he or she is forced to give them a chance to talk. So this is what our members of parliament have to do. You cannot just be crying every time, because if you cry that the Speaker of the National Assembly does not give you a chance to talk, what do you expect us to do? We are not in parliament. We are not in that parliament. We cannot do anything about it. So you, as a member of parliament, the young parliamentarians said, it is good they have what they call KYPA. They should all go to parliament. And if the Speaker denies them a chance to talk, let them cause chaos, let them do anything that they have to do, so that they can be seen and given a chance. And I think that our young members of parliament, they have to rise to the occasion, because we have seen there are so many. We have the biggest number of young members of parliament and senators in this regime. They have to bring motions, they have to bring bills that advocate for the empowerment of the young people. We have seen them doing some good things. We have seen people like Gideon Yolo doing good things, people like Babu Awino doing good things in their constituencies. But their main role, because the CDF is not the main role of a member of parliament. Some of them have been doing good. Even Peter Salasia have been doing good in his background. Yes. But when it comes to the roles of a member of parliament, legislation, oversight, and representation, I don't think they have been doing what they are supposed to do. Because these are the young members of parliament who should be bringing legislation in parliament, who should be bringing bills in parliament, to do away with help, to do away with all those good conducts, to do away with this what we are talking about, young people being brutalized by this government. These are the young members who we are looking up to as young people to fight for our rights and to advocate for our empowerment. But I don't think they have done so. So they need to pull up their socks and do something about it.
Okay. Because of time, final remarks, Mungai?
Thank you, Fred, for having us this morning. You know, it's always a pleasure to be where the untold stories are so that we can tell the stories. And you know, Morning Cafe is the only cafe that's living up to its bill. When you started by asking Kenyans how they are coping. And you know, you've provided us very good coffee and with sugar. And you know, sugar now is very expensive. Maybe this is one of the ways Mungai is coping this morning.
You should be coming to Morning Cafe more often.
I should be coming
as
to
a way to
Morning
cope with the high cost of
Cafe as
living.
a way to cope. And I want to thank our viewers for engaging us and wish them a very nice weekend. Hopefully we'll see each other sometime. Thank you.
Thank you, Mungai. Finally, Gichuki.
I would say thank you for inviting us here, and I call upon the government of our country to do what they are supposed to do. Let them not make any other promises. Let them first fulfill the promises they made. And I call upon our young people to raise to the occasion. Let them not fear, and let them stand for what they believe in. And I want to say thank you so much for giving us this chance, and we appreciate a lot.
Thank you so much, Gichuki Weru, a National Youth Spokesperson, TSP. That's the social party.
The service party.
The service party.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And Eric Mungai, political analyst and also a life member of the UDA party. Yes.
That's a good,
I got it.
you put it correct.
Life member of the UDA party. Our panelists this morning on the Youth Perspective as we continue discussing the Kenya Kwanza scorecard, 1 year and 2 days since President William Ruto took oath of office. It has been a very good discussion, and thank you so much for your very well considered opinions on that matter. For now, let me take this editorial comment this morning. Now, in the past year, Kenya has witnessed a troubling surge in human rights violations, as reported by the Independent Medical Legal Unit, IMLU. The report cites cases of torture, extrajudicial killings, and forced disappearances, and even the unthinkable torture of children. These findings cast a shadow over the promises made by President William Ruto, who took office just a year ago. IMLU's report reveals that the number of such cases has doubled to 482 in the last year alone. It is essential to examine this disconcerting trend and question the effectiveness of the president's commitment to uphold human rights as proclaimed during his inauguration. Now, the president's solemn promise that, quote, never again will cases of extrajudicial killings be the order of the day, raised hopes for a brighter future for Kenya. However, the recent surge in human rights abuses begs the question, what has changed? Why has the situation deteriorated instead of improving? These cases must be investigated and justice must prevail. President William Ruto, as the leader of the nation, bears a grave responsibility to ensure that the rights of all Kenyan citizens are upheld and protected. He took an oath to safeguard the Constitution, including the right to life, and it is now his duty to fulfill that oath without compromise. The time for rhetoric and promises has passed.